What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video. This video is going to be looking at Jesse Marsch's first game in charge against Leicester City. So we'll look at how Leeds lost the match by a scoreline of 1-0 in the Premier League. And before we get into the tactics behind the match, check out both my books. They're online on Amazon and there's links in the description below. Also check out Keyframe. It's how I'm making this video. Now let's get right into the tactics of the match. Now Leicester City lined up with their makeshift back four with their right fullback a little out of position as he usually plays in the midfield, and Chadbury would often come deeper to make a first line buildup of 3 players. Now from here we would then use single width through the wide area and then allow for the central midfielders to drop out of the half space and fan out into the wide positions to try and progress around Leeds' mid block. Now on the weak side we have our fullback playing a more natural role in line with the holding midfielder, and now we can see Leicester's midfield 3, often as we said Tielemans dropping out wide, moving away from his typical 8 position, and they did this in the response of Leeds' 4-2-4. Now they played a very aggressive front 4 that saw them have a ball-oriented press to try and press the ball carrier with a numerical advantage. And now with a ball-oriented press, it works best if the fullback is in the wide area and multiple players can press the ball while using their cover shadows to isolate the player and allow them to have a numerical advantage around the ball to then transition effectively going into the final third. Now we see in the midfield third, we have our 4-2-4 shape, and the first line of pressure is just about the same line as the holding midfielder for Leicester City. Now with our back 4 showing our asymmetry to create a makeshift back 3 and then having our left fullback position himself a little bit higher, we can now see the midfield 3 of Leicester and how it shapes up against a 4-2-4. So as we see, the 2 holding midfielders for Leeds are very much in good positions to use man orientation to block third line progressive passes into the midfield third. But what would happen at times is the Leicester City midfielders would drop into the wide area and then lose access to the Leeds player, so the defensive action was no longer able to occur by the time the ball arrived in the wide area to the Leicester City player. This gave Leicester City the advantage to progress through the wide area and create diagonal passing options towards an inverting winger who was then pinning the fullback as well, preventing any jumping of the fullback to press in the wide area as well. But we also see the front 4 for Leeds positioned very high because it gives them closer proximity to the fullbacks and the first line of build-up for Leicester City. So the amount of time it takes the player to adequately press the fullback or the ball carrier in the wide position is greatly decreased by about 10 yards because of this heightened position in a more advanced area. Now when Leeds would then defend deeper in their own half, they would go into a 4-4-2, which is a very natural transition into more of a 4-4-2, decreasing the compactness between the lines and controlling the more dangerous space and being more spatially oriented. This made Leeds very secure out of possession as well, and it gave Leicester City some trouble, which they tried to use dual width to then try and progress through the outside corridors of the field and create numerical advantages in the wide area to try and progress the ball and create chances going forward. Leeds built from the back with a back 4 with 2 narrow central defenders and 2 holding midfielders. Then we would see the use of minimum width on the weak side, then have our fullback come narrow and in line with our 2 holding midfielders. This would give them a numerical advantage to easily retain possession when Jamie Vardy would go and press. We also see the strong side fullback now using full width, trying to manipulate the positioning of the wide midfielder for Leicester City and create opportunities to progress via third line passing and taking advantages of pinning players in higher positions. This typically came from the 2 central forwards pinning and threatening behind to then create space between the lines that Leeds could then use to then progress through and access dangerous area. So even though they use minimum width and a very narrow front 4 as well as a narrow build-up shape, they're able to create space despite their narrow offensive structure because of players pinning and running in behind, as well as as using full width on one side and committing 2 holding midfielders to build up, which naturally attracts pressure from the 2 holding midfielders of Leicester. And we see a 4-1-4-1 from Leicester City, which saw a lot of pressure on their holding midfielder to cover the space between the lines, especially when their midfield 4 would be dragged forward because of the 2 holding midfielders and the fullbacks in a deeper position for Leeds United. So this would then allow Leeds to create these spaces between the lines, and Jamie Vardy, being the single striker, would have the task of pressing or cutting the field in half to then cut off circulation. Now in Leeds United build-up, they would try and create diagonal passing options between their central defenders and their 2 holding midfielders so that they weren't so vertically oriented and allowed the 2 holding midfielders to have a better field of view. Now in the 4-1-4-1 or 4-5-1 for Leicester City, we see typically the outside midfielders would be positioned a bit deeper, closer to the line of their holding midfielder to give them better access to the fullbacks, who on the strong side create full width to offer a solution to progress around the block and to create space for a player like Rafinha between the line. Now one more time for Leeds' offensive structure, we have their back 4 using minimum width on the weak side and maximum width on the strong side where the ball is. And we have our 2 clear holding midfielders and now our narrow front 4 with the outside midfielders playing inside the half space and using depth runs or pinning from our 2 strikers to then create space between the lines. Now from Leicester, we see clearly their 4-1-4-1 here, with the main target being the half space in the position around their holding midfielder of Leicester City, as the midfield 4 in front of their holding midfielder was very oriented toward the second line of build-up for Leeds and matched up very well man for man, which gave Leeds the opportunity to manipulate these players and create space and passing options further up the field. And then with now Iheanacho playing as the lone striker. That's where we're going to cap off the analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.